Hello, I'm Kate Mosse and I'm the author of the Joubert Family Chronicles, and we're here to celebrate The Ghost Ship, which is the third of 4 novels set against the diaspora of the Huguenots, covering 300 years of history, rebellion, feud, revenge and murder. One of the great joys of writing a series of books is that you can cover huge periods of history, and of course I'm in love with history. So this is 300 years, and it tells the story of the Huguenots from the eve of the Wars of Religion in 1562, which I talked about in The Burning Chambers, and it will end up in South Africa, in Franschhoek, in 1862. And if you like, it is the story of one woman and her mother and her grandmother and her great-grandmother, going all the way back to the beginning of the story. But it's also the story of 2 families who have been at war with one another, a Romeo and Juliet story, if you like, for all of this time. And The Ghost Ship, many of those themes come to a head, but of course everybody's trapped on the high seas. It's very interesting because I didn't really start by thinking I wanted to write about the Huguenots. It came from place, it came from being in Franschhoek, in South Africa, discovering that even the name meant the French corner, and learning about this tiny piece of history that I didn't know, which was some 200, 300 Huguenot refugees landed in 1688 in Cape Town, and in part are responsible for the South African wine industry, but were enormously a part of taking, I suppose, Western Reformation and all of the religious wars that were going on, and starting a new life somewhere else. So the idea, I suppose, at the back of it was the idea that it's possible to be a refugee and discover and build a new brilliant and dazzling life. But of course, because it's a Kate Mosse novel, it's an adventure novel, there's lots of jeopardy, there's lots of mystery, there's lots of secrets. And it is very much a cat and mouse game between 2 families going over those 300 years. And if you want to know what's going to happen, you have to read the 4th one, after The Ghost Ship. I have 2 protagonists in The Ghost Ship, and they are very much themselves, Louise and Gilles, and they're imagined characters, and they meet in La Rochelle, partway through the novel. But their inspiration for their story, they're not based on real people, but I'm inspired by 2 real female pirates from history from the 18th century called Bonnie and Reed. Mary Reed was English, and she started to dress as a boy when she was about 9 years old, we're not sure why, and lived most of her life passing as a man. And Anne Bonnie was married to a man called Mr. Bonnie, no surprise, but she fell in love with a pirate called Calico Jack. And they then sailed around the Caribbean and everybody was after them. And somewhere along the line, Bonnie and Reed met. And we think that they fell in love. And we don't know much about their story. We know that Mary Reed died in childbirth in prison in 1721. But Anne Bonny, she's just disappeared to history. And I rather like the idea that she's still out there on her own ghost ship, still sailing around the Caribbean. And their story and the story of other female pirates was the inspiration for my story in The Ghost Ship. The Ghost Ship is entirely made up. I'm sorry to say, it's imagined. But in terms of its structure, it's based on several 17th century Dutch merchant ships that were sailing between Amsterdam, La Rochelle, the Canary Islands, and increasingly the so-called New World, i.e. the Americas. And what I discovered when I was researching this is that the Canary Islands was this pivot of the world. It's where 4 continents meet. And it was at the heart of the wine trade. You know, you might have read in Shakespeare, they talk about canary sack in many of their books. That's Canarian wine, because it was the world leader at that time. And so all of these things started to inspire me to, I love the Canary Islands, and I've always wanted to set a novel there. And so The Ghost Ship is totally imagined, but I have put it in the real waters, the real shipping and piracy of that period of time, when the waters were infested with pirates coming from Morocco and also from Europe. And well, who can resist a naval battle at sea? Who can resist it? One of the biggest challenges for me writing The Ghost Ship, which is a novel that I've enjoyed writing more than almost any other novel I've written, actually. I really love this novel, is that landscape is at the heart of all of my fiction, whether it's my Gothic fiction or my adventure fiction. But in this case, The Ghost Ship, the landscape is the sea. And this is not my natural habitat at all. I don't sail, I don't like swimming in the sea. I think things are going to come and get me. I think I read Moby Dick when I was too young. So I did a huge amount of research talking to people who sail. I have an advisor who used to be a rear admiral in the Navy and knows everything about the ship. And he said this beautiful thing to me. He said, "Kate, you've just got to listen to the song of the ship." And once he said that, I started to be able to imagine what it would be like to hear the creaking and the movement and the wind in the sails and the sound of the anchor and the sailors playing on a pipe. And everything about writing fiction is about standing in somebody else's shoes. Everything. You know, I'm not a woman of the 17th century any more than I'm a pirate. But if I can make readers feel that they are there on that ship with the incredible stars all about them in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and then think, uh-oh, there's someone coming up behind us, then I've done my job. The Ghost Ship I very much and deliberately wrote as a standalone novel, and we are a generation later than we left the characters in the City of Tears. But those who have read The Burning Chambers first and then The City of Tears will be reunited with some of those characters who are now much older. They will be back in the story, which is about two families feuding with each other, a feud that goes back generations and will go generations into the future. They will be back in Europe in uproar. The idea that religion, of course, can be a force for good, but in this case is a force for ill, and the Huguenots are being persecuted, and they are being forced to flee, and they are refugees. Many of you will know that the word refugee comes from the French réfugié, and that's where the word came. It was invented for the Huguenots to explain their diaspora out of France. So there will be a great number of themes, if you like, religious intolerance, the position of women in a man's world, that will be familiar. The love affair with France, of course, and Amsterdam, which comes in The City of Tears. But at the same time, the Ghost Ship, because it's set mostly at sea, is very much its own story. So it takes the Joubert family a little bit further and closer, of course, to South Africa and the resolution of the story that will come in book 4. Many of my characters are people who are outsiders, that they don't quite fit with the customs or the mores of the time. Most of my protagonists are women, and of course women were always strong and independent and doing their own thing, but often the writing of them into history has made it seem as if women really didn't do very much. So obviously female pirates, they are the ultimate outsiders because women are not supposed to be on ships. It's bad luck to have women on ships. And so for this novel particularly, it was the idea of two people who were outsiders for different sort of reasons, and the liberty and the freedom that it gives you. All of my historical fiction is set at a turning point in history, the moment at which things could have gone another way and a completely different history would have been told. If the great French king Henri IV had not been assassinated in Paris in May 1610, and my protagonist is there and sees it happen, then we might never have had the French Revolution. His death changed everything. And so all of my fiction is putting people who are outsiders at these key moments in history and then seeing what happens, and they bear witness to the real history. It's wonderful fun to write. People often ask whether it's the setting or the characters that come first, and of course every novelist will give a different answer for that. For me, it is entirely place and history. And I do a huge amount of research. I research for longer than I'm writing. And then I know the real history, and I know the backbone of real history. And then I know that there will be secrets and mystery, and of course there will be quite a high body count in a Kate Mosse novel, sorry about that. But it's like building a stage set. And once I have all of that, and I know the sort of novel that I'm going to write, so with The Ghost Ship, I knew it was going to be a pirate novel. I knew it was going to have that sense of liberty and freedom at sea. I then start writing and see who turns up to play. So I don't know my protagonist when I start. I start writing, I know that it's a young woman, and then little by little, Louise Joubert takes shape. And then I'm in La Rochelle, and little by little, Gilles takes shape. So it's always place, always mystery, always history, and then the characters come and they play. Thank you so much for watching. As you can see, I just had a blast writing this novel, and I hope you're going to enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it. And look out for number 4, which will be out in 2024. See you soon.